They're also afraid, I think, of, in this day and age of what's going on, to talk about what happens after we die. There's a lot of speculation. And I thought to myself, gee, there's a lot of people that are mourning, there are a lot of people that are grieving, but one of the things that I found very interesting, there's a lot of people that are searching. And they're searching, and they're searching, and they're searching, and I'm wondering, where are they looking? And it seems like everywhere except the Bible. But I said, that's very strange. To me, obviously, because I'm a Christian. But I always wondered why people don't really actually study it a little bit closer. Why they don't look a little bit further into how do we know whether God even exists or not. We're having trouble with that now as a generation. We're trying to figure out if God actually exists. And what I found interesting is that in Matthew, the 11th chapter, Jesus gives an interesting illustration of how we get to know God. So I said, well, let's take a look at that. And it says in verse 25, at that time Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. I thought about that for a second. How do we know that there's a God? You know that scientists have been searching and searching and going back and forth and trying to figure out how the universe began. And they've gone back pretty far, I have to say. It's quite interesting to see a lot of the research and read some of the things that have happened. Robert Jastrow was an internationally known astronomer. He worked for NASA. He was also a professor at Columbia University, Dartmouth. And what is interesting is that he was studying astronomy and studying the universe, and he himself proclaimed to be an agnostic. And for some of us that don't know what an agnostic is or need to be reminded, it's a person who holds the view that an ultimate reality, such as God, is unknown and probably unknowable. So this is a little different, right? There's another people that say there's no God. They're just saying, how do we quantify God? How do we even know? How do we do, let's say, for example, an experiment that there's an actual God? There's no concrete evidence in their mind. These are the scientists that say, well, unless I can put it in a test tube or I can come up with some kind of theory, I'm not going to believe that. What really is interesting is that in all his studies, he came to a realization that science can only go so far. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Big Bang Theory. I know it's a show on TV, but it's actually a theory also. The Big Bang Theory is this idea that the universe started out of this massive explosion and everything came into being. And then a little child can kind of destroy that theory by saying, why? Ever been around a little child that just keeps asking why and you get frustrated because after a while you don't have the answer to it? Like, because your mom said so, or because I said so. That's usually how we end it, right? We just get them away from us finally. But we keep asking the question, why? So I asked the question one time, what happened? Why? Why was there a Big Bang and how did it come about? Scientists are still trying to figure this out, so they're coming up with theories and other experiments. But Jastrow was thinking to himself, yeah, we worked everything back to this point now where we have a little bit of a problem as scientists. We kind of pushed ourselves into this corner, painted ourselves there, and we can't really get out of this little thing that we painted ourselves into. And he is quoted as saying, the barrier of further progress seems insurmountable. It's not a matter of another year, another decade of work, another measurement, or another theory. At this moment, it seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain on the mystery of creation. For the scientist who has lived by his faith and power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. He pulls himself over the final rock. He's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. This is from a book that he wrote called God and the Astronomers. There's a mystery that scientists are struggling with that the theologians don't really struggle with. Not to say that theologians don't struggle with other questions, but on the question of whether there's a God, they've gotten to that point already. They're sitting at the mountaintop waiting for the scientists to get there and go, come and join us. There's a mystery in creation. If we talk to people, and I've talked to people say, well, yeah, I think there is some intelligent design out there. That somehow the universe didn't just poof, come into existence out of nothing. We have trouble with that. So people on a general level have this idea that there's some design to the universe. Because scientists are looking at all the things that are going on in the world and in the universe, and they realize there's something more that we can't grasp, that we can't reduce down to. And what's kind of interesting is that when you read the verse that I read earlier, in verse 25 of Matthew chapter 11, these are the smart guys, by the way, that are doing all these studies. These are the creme de la creme. These are the people that send us to outer space, that are trying to get us to Mars, that are trying to do all these wonderful things. And Jesus says, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, and revealed them to little children. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the naive thoughts of little children destroy all the learning and wisdom that we think that we have in this world? There are things that God reveals to us. And for the scientists, it seems like a very long journey of study to get to the point that we have already been given in the Bible. One of the most important things that we ever read in the Bible is in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. It's real simple, but we spent years and years and years and tons of money trying to figure out how everything began, when in this book of Genesis, it says, in the beginning, God created everything. I find it interesting because there's a basic understanding and we can't put our hand on it. We can't put our finger on it. We can't tangibly hold it all the time. But we know, deep down inside, there's something greater than us. We are afraid to name it. We are afraid to call it out for what it is. Christians, you call it God the Father, revealed in His Son, Jesus Christ. For other people, they have difficulty with this. And I find it interesting that we spend a tremendous amount of time studying all of creation. We spend billions and trillions of dollars studying things. And we get so caught up in studying the creation that we miss the Creator. It's like what I said earlier. We take it for granted that we can get up in the morning, that we breathe, that all the functioning of our body, which also functions in this environment, it all functions so well. We forget that. On occasion, we're reminded when we don't feel well, when we have trouble breathing, or we happen to end up in an environment where we shouldn't be in necessarily without help. We start to realize, ooh, something that I took for granted, like breathing, is becoming very difficult right now. That's one of the things that is the basic revelation of God. He gave us all of creation. And we sometimes get so caught up in the creation that we don't go past that basic understanding and that basic revelation of God. That yes, I designed all this, and I designed it so that you could live in it and enjoy it and partake in it and be stewards of it, but I want you to have something greater than that. That was the beginning. That was the baby steps. Kind of funny to think that someone who had all those degrees and had all that knowledge and taught so many young people only had a basic knowledge, a basic understanding of really what was going on.